All right, welcome everyone to our first webinar of National Entrepreneurship Week 2022. Today we're going to be doing 4 back-to-back webinars from K-12 all the way out through entrepreneurship education beyond a formal classroom. We're really excited to get started. We're going to have a quick kickoff video that introduces what National Entrepreneurship Week is.
Welcome to National Entrepreneurship Week. My name is Joe Capp.
And I'm Amber Ravenscroft.
5 years ago, we relaunched National Entrepreneurship Week, a congressionally chartered annual event to support and uplift America's new.
Whoops. Well, I think we may have lost Amber, so I'm not sure if she might have accidentally hit. Oh, there she is. Hi, Amber. Not sure what happened to you. Welcome back.
So here I am trying this again. So give me one quick second. I'm having internet issues forever. So let me do that real quick.
I think we've all had those experiences.
Absolutely.
For sure.
All right.
Welcome to National Entrepreneurship Week. My name is Joe Capp.
And I'm Amber Ravenscroft.
5 years ago, we relaunched National Entrepreneurship Week, a congressionally chartered annual event to support and uplift America's new business startups. Originally founded in 2006, National Entrepreneurship Week takes place every year during the 3rd week of February.
All across the United States, from Maui to Miami to Maine and everywhere in between, America's entrepreneurial ecosystem is vibrant and thriving. National Entrepreneurship Week celebrates the unmatched, innovative American spirit that has brought to life amazing products and services and includes a beautiful tapestry of diverse entrepreneurs.
During the week, you'll hear from a host of United States federal agencies as they share information on their entrepreneurship and small business programs. You'll also hear from a nationwide network of partners, including entrepreneurial educators, ecosystem builders, and most importantly, entrepreneurs from all walks of life as they participate in the excitement of National Entrepreneurship Week.
Join in celebrating National Entrepreneurship Week by organizing an event in your local community, listening in on one of our national webinars, or participating in our annual social media campaign.
There has never been a better time to start a new business, and we challenge you to unleash your ideas into action during National Entrepreneurship Week.
National Entrepreneurship Week is made possible by contributions from an array of generous partners.
The views and opinions expressed in National Entrepreneurship Week programs are those of the speaker and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of National Entrepreneurship Week, its agents, or any U.S. government agency. Any agency's participation or support is not an endorsement of any product, service, or entity. All liability with respect to any recommendations are hereby expressly disclaimed.
All right, perfect. So I apologize for any technical issues. We're definitely figuring that out. But I'm excited to introduce our first panel, which is on entrepreneurship education and higher ed. And it will be moderated by Julian Shields, the president and CEO of the United States Association for Small Business and Entrepreneurship. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to you, Julian.
Amber, thank you very much. And thank you to all the organizing staff for this tremendous week of celebration and education about entrepreneurship throughout the United States. So thank you. And thank you to my panelists today. We've got Mindy Walls. Mindy is at Waynesburg University, and she's the W. Robert Stover Chair for Entrepreneurial Leadership and the Director of the Entrepreneurship and Innovation Program at Waynesburg University. So welcome, Mindy.
Thanks, Julie.
We also have Justin Wilcox, who is the founder of teachingentrpreneurship.org, and just an incredible energy and spirit behind teaching entrepreneurship and helping entrepreneurs and educators throughout the United States and abroad learn about lean startup and different technologies and ways of teaching entrepreneurship. So welcome, Justin.
Thanks so much. Happy to be here.
And we also have Joshua Spears, who is a grad student in entrepreneurship at East Carolina University. And Josh has also helped out USASB with our annual conference as a moderator, and he's a wicked dancer. So welcome, Josh.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Fantastic. So let's go through, and I'm just going to ask each of you to introduce yourselves and give a little bit of context about you and what you do, maybe 2 or 3 minutes. So Mindy, let's start with you.
Sure. Thanks, Julie. My name's Mindy Walls, and as Julie mentioned, I am a professor at Waynesburg University in Waynesburg, Pennsylvania. I've been in entrepreneurship education about 15 years now. So I've really kind of seen it progress quite dramatically over that time period. And what a fun journey it's been. Currently, I serve as the board chair of the United States Association of Small Business and Entrepreneurship. So I'm happy to work with Julie in that capacity as well.
Fantastic. And Justin.
Yeah, so my name is Justin Wilcox. I'm one of the founders of teachingentrpreneurship.org, and our mission is really to help entrepreneurship be taught in an experiential way. So how do we really teach entrepreneurship skills, both to students who want to be entrepreneurs and those who aren't really sure what their relationship to entrepreneurship is yet? And my background is I'm a computer science major. I left a large software company to build an incredible piece of software that no one wanted. So I learned the hard way how important it is to be customer-centric, and then that turned into a lot of work at startup accelerators and enterprises on how we teach entrepreneurship and how we actually practice it. And that's led me through now to the last 5 years just working in academia, particularly in higher education, on how do we take real-world lean startup customer development ideas and bring them into the classroom. So excited to be here and share any knowledge I can.
Fantastic. Thanks, Justin. And Joshua.
Sure. So my name is Joshua Spears. I'm a second-year grad student at East Carolina University. I'm a graduate assistant with Miller School of Entrepreneurship, so I do a lot of work with the programming we have for our student startups. And I've also been involved in different pitch competitions, hackathons, and I completed our entrepreneurship certificate in my undergrad time here. So been involved in around the Miller School and entrepreneurship at EDU for my entire time.
Fantastic. And they've got a very experiential program there, if memory serves. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Fantastic. All right. So let's get into our first question. So today's topic for National Entrepreneurship Week is entrepreneurship with a number of different contexts and time frames. And with higher ed, one of the main differences that I've always found is that whereas in secondary and elementary education, a lot of the curriculum is a lot of entrepreneurship curriculum, if there even is entrepreneurship curriculum, is really set, and the outcomes are set by the state. In higher education, faculty really own the curriculum, and that's great, but it also plays a lot of challenges because people have to kind of come up with how to teach it and what to teach on their own in many ways. So what are some of the challenges and opportunities do you guys think this offers to faculty and to entrepreneurship programs? Mindy, let's start with you and then we'll go to Justin.
Sure. Yeah, I love this question because you're exactly right. And I actually, like a true entrepreneur, think it's an opportunity rather than a hindrance to have any particular type of curriculum that's prescribed for us. I really, over the 15 years that I have been working in entrepreneurship education, the materials, even the methodologies have changed dramatically. And I really love the ability to be able to experiment with new things as they come around. I mean, the material that Justin's group puts together is fabulous. I used it in my courses as well as a number of other content providers. Materials that our colleagues in USOSP talk about at our annual conference. I can very quickly just drop those exercises into my classroom the next semester without having to go through a lot of hoops to get something into the course room. So I think the academic freedom aspect is really a wonderful thing, and really, really advantageous to both our faculty members who are trying to make their their courses as interactive and engaging as possible, and also to our students, because we're always able to be trying new things and be on the cutting edge. So I really look at that particular thing not as a problem, but as a real opportunity.
Yeah, I'll agree that there's something really unique about teaching entrepreneurship as opposed to teaching another subject like, you know, algebra or biology, where we really, I don't think we can learn it by reading a textbook or teaching via lectures, right? These are a set of skills that are really about connecting with humans, understanding their emotional needs, and then teaching the skills around experimentation and iteration, like how do I come up with a hypothesis, a business hypothesis, and how I test these things. And we simply can't learn them by reading something or just watching someone read through bullet points. So to that end, like having someone else determine and pre-select a curriculum, I don't think is ideal. At the same time, we know instructors are being asked to do more and more with fewer resources. And so like, there's something really nice to having someone like give you a textbook and say, hey, I can just quickly adopt this. So, and especially in like in high schools where, you know, maybe you're having instructors who don't have a lot of like experience with being entrepreneurs or teaching entrepreneurship. So I can see the benefits to having, you know, both available. And so, you know, the last thing, sort of to Mindy's point, like we're still learning how to be great innovators, right? Like this is a science that we are kind of developing along the lines. And so having the flexibility to be able to shift and like try new things and experiment ourselves and practice what we're preaching in terms of being innovators and learning how to teach innovation in an innovative way. I think there's a world for both. There's a really nice place to having like, hey, here's a resource you can use if you're just sort of behind the ball and you need to go teach something. But then also like having the freedom to be able to explore and experiment with new things and the flexibility to bring in external resources as appropriate. I think that's a huge benefit to higher education faculty.
Yeah, and if I can just tack on a little bit to that, you know, it's Justin's point of we're still evolving, you know, and I don't know if you found this in your all's classrooms, but sometimes the thing that works really well for one group doesn't work well at all for the next group. And having a wide array of exercises and tools that you can go to is, I think, incredibly valuable. But as Justin points out, the downside is you do have to go searching for the tools. I mean, there is that, you know, you do have to go find those tools.
Well, I think one of the main things that I've also heard over the past couple of years is that instructors and professors are being asked to teach classes they haven't had to teach before, and being able to round out some of those teaching techniques, tools, stories, all of that becomes part of a kind of an exhausting, but also inspirational in some ways journey for them as well. So there's a number of different ways to look at it. You're right. So Josh, let me ask you a little bit different question, because I know that curriculum's probably not the thing that you're just dying to talk about at this moment in time. I mean, maybe, but so let's talk about entrepreneurship experiences. What are some great classes or experiences that you've had that have been very impactful for you at East Carolina?
Sure. So I think for me, like you said, experiential learning is pretty big at ECU. And so one of the ways that we challenge our students, even in our intro to entrepreneurship class, is something that's called the Provost Challenge, in which case there'll be a question or some sort of idea that's put out by the provost of our university. And then teams will pitch ideas within the Entrepreneurship 3500 course. And then the top 4 teams will be able to progress to pitching in front of administration and the provost. So the year that I participated, my senior year of undergrad, we were tasked with coming up with ways to combat decreased enrollment. So my group was able to look at, okay, well, a lot of times there's a cost prohibitive thing to it. I mean, maybe students don't have enough funds. And so our idea was income share agreements, which was a way for students to have a degree completion scholarship. My group actually won the competition, and then leading on to that, I was able to get an internship with the provost office, and they were actually going to implement program, and we had money for it and all that sort of stuff. And then the pandemic hit and resources are diverted and all these sorts of things. But from the learning experience, we have the pitch competition, we have those pitching skills, we have problem solving skills, we have the teamwork, all of that in the experiential style. And then from the internship that followed from that, we get to see some of the ways that we form those community partnerships, talk with alumni, how do we get the donations, all that sort of stuff, which is some of those funding opportunities that you might see for a business startup. So, and then other things that I would say have been pretty impactful is any of our student consulting projects where we're paired with a local business, might be a startup, might be a little bit more established, but working in some of those teams to really identify where there's areas of weaknesses in any part of that industry.
Fantastic. That's great. And it sounds like you've had a number of different courses where this has been kind of infused as a part of your entrepreneurship program.
Yes, ma'am. So we don't have a graduate program in entrepreneurship here at ECU. So, but many of the courses that I am taking, they do have some of those student consulting projects and things within those specified course areas. And then, of course, in my role as a graduate assistant, then I'm still able to see some of the things that we're doing in our undergrad classes and some of the things that we're doing in our competitions for students.
Oh, well, and I think that's great. You hit on a really good point, and that is that entrepreneurship isn't just for entrepreneurship classes or business classes, right? These are for entrepreneurship can, and probably, I hate to use the should word, but we'll say can certainly be infused into all different kinds of classes and experiences. And I think that that's an important way as we innovate and as we grow and develop these competencies to think about. This is not just for business school anymore. This is for all over campus. So, all right, next set of questions here. So, student engagement. And Justin, I think I'd like to probably start with you on this. Student engagement pre-COVID was something that we were already working through, and there was a lot of different strategies in play. What happened? Like, what are some different things that have happened since then? What has stayed the same with student engagement? And what are some things that you've maybe seen change and, again, innovate throughout it?
Yeah, it's been fascinating to kind of keep our pulse on student engagement, which we know is probably the number one challenge that the people that we serve, which are entrepreneurship instructors, face is, how do I keep students engaged? Pre-pandemic, one of the things that we were consistently doing is bringing in new tools to the classroom, like new technologies, Kahoot, Slido, just different Wix to build landing pages, Powtoon, like a bunch of different tools and experiences to help students like level up their skills in terms of great tools they can use in the market. What we've seen with the pandemic is a lot of technology fatigue. So we've seen students get really tired of being on Zoom, of learning new technologies, learning new tools. And so as we've shifted back to the classroom, what we've been doing in our tool set is actually cutting a bunch of technology to both simplify things for students and again, just get away from that fatigue and then bring more connectivity. So where we used to do like Kahoot quizzes with your phone, it's okay, just skip all that. I want you to raise your hand, or I want you to stand up, and I want you to vote with movement or physicality. So we've been doing a lot of that. We also saw a big shift. Obviously, there's a ton of like now education that's happening online via Zoom. And so we've done a lot of work to help our community like leverage different tools and techniques. I'll try something here. We'll see if it works, where I can theoretically do a little like split screen here with my slides and my video. And so now as I'm talking to you, I can kind of progress through my slides and you get kind of the side-by-side view, so that for instructors who are teaching online, there's different ways that we can do that. So I'll go find the blog post that we have that talks about how to do this. It's relatively easy to do things like this, as well as like playing music. So we do a lot of like things to kind of keep things energized when you're on Zoom calls. I'll find those blog posts and I'll put links in here into the chat for anyone who wants to know like how to do this exactly, those things. But those are the two things that I think we've spent a lot of time on. For online education, let's leverage the technology we can to create an engaging experience. And for in-person, let's get rid of as much technology as possible.
I love it. Mindy, how about you?
Yeah, I think that is spot on. What you just mentioned, that's the experience that we've been seeing too. But I do think there's one thing that that we did that our group is especially proud of during the pandemic. Waynesburg University really is a very service-oriented university, and we had developed a relationship with a women's group in a small impoverished village in the Dominican Republic. And we were all set to do a service trip down there over spring break. We were gonna, really work with these women to help them kind of create an economy in their particular area. And this was a commitment that we'd made for a long-term type of commitment. And so then COVID happened, and we weren't going anywhere, and we weren't going anywhere for a long time. And that really forced us to rethink how we could honor this commitment that we've made to this village. And we were able to do something that I think we never would have tried but for COVID, and that is engage this community remotely. It took a lot of logistics because really very limited internet access. The women have to travel to another community. It's not always safe, and so there had to be security, and of course we had to provide all of the electronics necessary to do anything that would allow remote connectivity. But because we had already started with this relationship, we had some existing folks on the ground that were able to help us with that. And really for about the last year now, we have been consulting with this women's group in the Dominican Republic remotely. Our students prepare lessons and teach them and coach them. They have started a small jewelry business. They've also developed a savings group, a community savings group, and they're working to raise some money to build a water well in their community so they can have better access to fresh water. And that is something that without COVID, I don't think we would have ever even tried. And so I do feel as though there's been some benefit to being forced into really kind of innovating, because not only have we been able to help this community when they've basically been shut off from every place else, but we've also been able to give our students an international experience that they would have never had had they not participated in this program. So, I mean, that is one way that engagement works, but I totally agree with Justin. Getting back to the old hand raising and moving around the classroom is definitely the way to go when we're in person, because I think we've all kind of missed that that type of just old-fashioned classroom learning.
Joshua, what's it been like from your perspective as a student? What has engagement been like in the past year or two?
Sure. I'd even speak on this a little bit in a programming standpoint. I am involved in some on-campus or student government, et cetera, things like that. And I'd say that it's more of like a trade-off between barrier to entry and quality of engagement, because a lot of times we think, okay, COVID, this is a new barrier to entry. It's harder to get folks online, that sort of stuff. But if you think about it, these folks that are committed to doing something like that, they may have a higher standard for what that quality would be. And so throughout the past couple of years, we have this sort of thing of like, oh my gosh, we have super low engagement, everything's online, we don't know what to do. And then when we come back in person for that first year, whenever that was, it seems like it's gone on forever, but you had a surge of engagement across the board that may not have translated to individual organizations or entrepreneurial classes, programming things, because students were bombarded with so many different opportunities that they may have just taken for granted before. And so I think that where we are right now in campus may actually be the same level of engagement, or maybe even a little bit lower than we were seeing pre-pandemic, just because the students that do want to be engaged, they have so many different opportunities that I think it's a little bit harder maybe to differentiate yourself. And so I think for me, that solution is to actually decrease those barriers to entry while maintaining a higher standard for the quality of engagement.
Interesting. All right. So, go
just
ahead.
around the topic of engagement, if it's helpful, I just wanted to throw out a couple of the exercises that we give away that I found particularly engaging, that we get really good response back. So I'll just throw these in the chat in case they help anyone increase engagement in the classroom. One of them is called the 60-minute MVP, which is where students actually build an MVP in an hour without any coding experience whatsoever. It typically is pretty like high energy. It gets students like exposure to a couple of those tools that I mentioned, but it also like helps them feel like they've achieved something and take a skill going forward. So we just get lots of good feedback around that. And the other one is fairly new. It's called Pilot Your Purpose. And this one is to help make entrepreneurship relevant for students who may not have a strong connection to it. Who may not understand, like, why am I being asked to take this class? Or how did I end up in this class? And it helps them sort of understand, like, what are the things that they want to go pursue in life? Like, what are their skills? What are their interests? And where do they want to make an impact? And then you get to frame your course around them pursuing their purpose in life, like just testing out, like, do I want to spend the rest of my life doing this? And so you get to frame entrepreneurship skills in terms of like a playground for them to go see what they want to spend the rest of their career doing, which can be a really great way to engage students who don't necessarily want to necessarily start their own company. So I'll toss those into the chat as well, and if they're helpful, please feel free to take them.
Perfect, thank you. Well, and as we look at the instructor's role, right? So, and that's really what Justin's speaking to, is how are you creating a whole environment, right? And all of us, really, how do we create that environment for our students where they can engage? It's not just engaging within the classroom, but it's also engaging within our community. So in the higher ed sphere, many of our institutions are tasked with making those connections strong within the community. And oftentimes the entrepreneurship programs that are very well suited to be that connection point. So as you look at entrepreneurship programs and even the role of individual instructors as they're creating these experiences, these engaging experiences for students, what are some strategies or thoughts do you guys have on how the entrepreneurship instructors and or programs can have an impact within the community? I'm not sure who would like to start with this one. Maybe Mindy, how about you?
Sure. Yeah, I think that's so important because, as you know, entrepreneurs are part of the communities in which they operate. And so I believe it's the instructor's role to introduce that to students in the classroom through classroom projects. Those, the pilot your purpose, that Justin was just talking about, that exercise is a great one to figure out what your students are actually interested in. And there are so many community partners that are willing and eager to have students work on problem-solving exercises, or coming up with ideas that can help them move their agencies forward. We see this a lot with nonprofits that need some extra help and would love student entrepreneurs to help them come in and do some problem solving exercises and see opportunities where maybe they don't see them. Just to give you a specific, couple of years ago, right before the pandemic, we engaged with our local food pantry and did a course with a team course with Carnegie Mellon University, where we looked at food insecurity in our rural community. And entrepreneurship students participated in that. They did a lot of customer discovery, really came up using the design thinking process, came up with some solutions And from that particular work, we first had a number of their short-term solutions accepted, but that also then led us to identify some more difficult problems, which were really transportation issues in the area. And as a result, our entrepreneurship program, along with Carnegie Mellon, partnered together and wrote a grant to the Department of Energy. And we're now working on a research grant to help improve transportation in our communities, some new and innovative ways to do that. And none of that would have been possible if we hadn't just reached out to our community partners, because, and the reason that we chose food insecurity was because that was something that was really important to our students. And so you can see how creating this ecosystem and this network not only helps student learning, but it also helps the communities in which we operate.
I love that, and just sort of piggybacking on bringing in the outside community and collaborating. There's two specific instances where individual faculty members, I think, have a lot of sort of power to empower those connections that come to mind. The one is guest speakers. Like, guest speakers are, like, students love them, not just because they get to hear someone else's voice, but students really love if your guest speakers are comfortable sharing their contact information with students. Students, we've heard, love that. Even if they never contact them, they just love the idea that, like, someone, like a real person from the community is willing to take time with them and is willing to share their contact information. So that's a great way to sort of like make small connections in your community. The other is on pitch day, on the last day of class, or sort of when you're having students do your pitches. We did an article that's a collaboration with Meg Weber at Western Washington University, where she talks about how they grow their community, and that's a huge opportunity for them to plant seeds with members of the outside community, basically like see what you are enabling our students to do when you do a fundraiser or when you collaborate with students on projects. So she's actually put together some tips. Sorry to fill the chat up with things to read, but I'll put that in there in the chat as well if you want to see like what she wrote up in her suggestions on how to grow your community using these pitch days. Yeah, so I'll toss that in there as well. And I think, I think Joshua, you actually have done some of these projects with other with people in the community, right?
I have, yes, multiple. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask. So how do you feel like they've been received by the community? What's been your perspective on that?
For the most part, I mean, it's pretty positive. I think that for those examples being consulting projects, you have a certain expectation of what the quality of product's going to be. They're most of the time they're not paying for a professional report. It is a report by students, but I think that at that point they're seeing what sort of skills that students can provide. And it's an opportunity for students as well to learn more about the different businesses in the area. But I think really when we go back to like professors and programs, I think they represent a lot of the same things, both the students and community members, because it's a networking opportunity and it's expert knowledge. And so if you're thinking about ways that you want to continue to build collaboration, it's about building trust. And so when you can continue to have students that are working in community projects, okay, well, then that's that great point where you can have students getting that experiential learning. But like Justin was talking about, bringing folks in, I think one of the great ways that we engage folks here at ECU is with our annual pitch competition. We just had it's a 3-round competition. We just had the second round here in January. And for 6 teams moving forward, 5 are paired with either a local community member or an alumni as a way to mentor them into the final round. So that's a very direct way that we can engage our students with members of the community. And then just on with that, we also have community members come in to judge our competitions, to provide resources to our students, et cetera, like that.
Brilliant. I have one quick thing I want to share about the role of faculty engagement within the community, because many of us have community incubators or accelerators that are if they're affiliated with the university, it's a very loose affiliation. There's just kind of these ties that bind. And the funny story that I've got is that somebody reached out and wanted somebody to come and give a quick lecture or a quick learning experience on a topic related to marketing. And I recommended a couple people, and they're like, no, we want somebody who's actually going to do like an exercise, not a lecture. And they already knew that entrepreneurship education is very experiential, and as a community that's even outside of the business school, they were like, no, we don't want higher ed lecture. We want experience. We want movement. They're like, that's what we're looking for. We're looking for people that can do that. So I just share that because as educators, a lot of times we think that people want lectures and what's in our head, but a lot of times it's also what can we do and how can we affect a feeling among those who are teaching it. And that's not just within a regular classroom, but that's within the community as well. So anyway, I thought that was kind of interesting. So we've got somebody who had, we have a Q&A, somebody who put a question in there. If you guys are cool with it, let's go ahead and maybe see if we can speak to some of this. So the question is, it seems like every university is having their own pitch competition. Is there an opportunity to improve them by collaborating with multiple universities? And I'm going to throw a little bit of maybe a sidestep to this too. What are your thoughts on pitch competitions? Because I've also heard positives and negatives about them. So let's
I'll
open
jump
it up.
in.
Yeah, go for it.
I've got strong feelings about pitch competitions. Okay, so my first thought, just to answer the Q&A question, I love the idea of multiple schools coming together. I think it's just huge. If you can have like a regional competition, or make it as big as you can. I think it's a win-win for everyone involved. I know I speak to instructors basically every day, and there are definitely a group of instructors who will up their game if they know that their students are going to be participating in a competition. And they'll push their students to sort of achieve more. So it's a win for students, it's a win for the instructors, it's the win for the school. So yeah, if you're in a position to be able to help organize that and sort of cross-pollinate a competition, I think that's huge. That said, what are you competing on? So this is my big beef with pitch competition. So in my humble opinion, in an academic setting, what we are teaching are entrepreneurship skills, okay? What often happens for pitch competitions is we're trying to emulate the Shark Tank style VC-oriented pitch, which is, there's a very different goal for that. That goal is to optimize for investment, right? That is, you are getting the founder to sort of tell the story of a rocket ship that is taking off, and there are limited seats, and you need to get your butt on the seat or get out of my way, right? And that's what that pitch is optimized for. And so to have our students who are still learning entrepreneurship skills, one of which is being able to tell when an idea does not deserve to be built, and to sort of tell them, I need you to stand up here and tell this fiction about this amazing company that you're starting. We're at cross purposes. We're not teaching a skill there. We're teaching a different skill, which is how to BS people. And no one likes that, and they turn into really bad pitches. So instead, what I'll offer you is what we call the pitch process pitch. I'll put a link to it as well in terms of like how we detail it. And what it is it's students telling the story of their learning journey. So we are assessing them not on the progress that they've made, like how far they've made it, how many pre-orders or what sort of story they can tell. We want to assess them on the process that they used to get there. What hypotheses did you have? How did you test those hypotheses? What did you learn by testing those hypotheses, and how did you integrate that into your future iterations of your business model canvas or whatever tool you want to use? So it's really about like, show me that you understand the process and you've developed the skills to go find a validated business model at the end, somewhere in your career. Not the thing I did for the 12 weeks in this class is going to be the next big widget, right? Like that's not very realistic. So I'll step off my soapbox. I'll put a link in the chat to more information, and then I'll let someone else hop on theirs.
No, I actually agree I think that pitch competitions are great. I think it's wonderful to incentivize students to really, when they're competing for something, like money or services, I think that pushes a student to really test things further. But I totally agree that it is difficult in a semester or even a year to have the full formed business that is going to be the next best thing seeking funding. So I do love the skill sets. Was very involved in a previous role with developing a statewide competition where students, faculty from all over the state of West Virginia participated in competitions. But I do think we have to be honest about what it is that the students are able to present. And I do love the model that Justin talked about. Yes, I think there is a place for those few that are really absolutely moving forward and have been working on them for years. But I think there's also a place for the pitch process competition too, which I believe is more kind of what you were describing, Justin. And I feel like there's room for both. And there really should be both in competitions that move forward. And as far as the question about collaboration, I love that. I think anytime you can add a little fun, friendly competition between schools, you're going to get a better product.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're exactly right, Minnie, that there's a place for both of those things. And what we've seen is that the students, like, if we can use that process pitch as the sort of the first round,
right?
What the students, what they talk about are like basically the data that they've gathered. And if you can have your students do a process pitch that talks about like, hey, here's the roadblocks we ran into, and then we overcame them. That's an amazing story to tell as part of a more traditional investor style pitch, where you're telling the investors, hey, this isn't just pie in the sky. I have real data, and we are actually able to maneuver and shift based on the needs of the market. I do think there's a world for both. But like almost all of the schools instructors I talk to just skip straight to the investor style pitch, because like that's what everyone else does. So I would love to see some innovation around like, hey, we're doing multi-school process pitch, and who really is learning the most here. That would be, and we're excited to participate. So if you do that, email me, justin@teachinge.org, and we'll help any way we can. We'll help advertise for you and help you get some more people to participate in it.
Well, and of course, probably most people are aware of the Collegiate Entrepreneurs Organization, CEO, and they've got a great way of, it's an international pitch competition actually as well. So they've got a different platform that, as long as it's a CEO, as long as you've got a CEO chapter at your university, you have students that can start getting into that cycle so that they can pitch at some international levels. So it's kind of fun. They do a lot of great stuff. I've been pretty impressed with what they had going on. Josh, do you have any thoughts on pitch competitions, regional competitions? How inspiring are those to you? Do they help you focus? Are they a distraction to everything else going on in your student life? What are your thoughts?
I think they're definitely a good thing. I think I understand the points that were brought up before. I think that some of the times when you are talking about crafting a pitch, it can be easy to get so focused on the pitch that you do forget the actual skills that you need to have to form whatever that idea is. So I understand there's points. I would say for like forming something regionally, we have a lot of different like undergraduate research symposiums, things like that. So I think you could have some sort of format in that style where you would have student teams registered to participate. And if you're talking about ways to have students focus, I think some of the best events I've been a part of have been ones that have been themed around solving problems. So, I mean, the Provost Challenge is one that's specific to the university, but another hackathon event I did in undergrad was themed around disaster relief. And there was actually a product that came out of that one. The fella friend of mine, he ended up working for IBM, and they did develop the product. And I think that when you can have some of these events that are a little bit more focused in what they're trying to have students produce, it might be a little bit easier to do some of that vetting process for than some of these open student pitch competitions. But I think that when we're thinking about issues with pitch competitions and why universities may be so incentivized to continually host them, is we have to think about the measures that universities are measured by. So if we think about Princeton Review and things like that, where we're saying, okay, we have to have X student startups and X student funding dollars and things like that, is I think that you're putting universities in sort of a tight space of saying that we need to have this number of businesses produced by our program, whether or not they're successful businesses. And so I think that if you can say, okay, we want to be able to advertise our program by saying it is successfully ranked at this level, but then some of the things that we're telling the university to do isn't necessarily reinforcing those positive entrepreneurial processes that we want our students to take.
Oh man, right on. That's a lot of it, right? It's what are we measuring success as a program? So that's great. That actually that's a perfect segue to the next Q&A question that came in is, what do you know? So let's define this a little differently. This is the question: what do universities need most to have strong entrepreneurship education programs and initiatives? And strong versus successful, right? Like, I think that's that's kind of one of the big questions I have. Is a lot of times success is measured by the labels and the awards, the Princeton Review type of things that organizations get. But what is a strong entrepreneurship program at a university, and what are the key elements, do you think? That's such an unfair question, but it's a great question. So let's dig into that.
Well, I'll just start by what I think a strong entrepreneurship program is. And, you know, Josh, I think you hit the nail on the head of some of the measurements that, you know, are about business creation, you know, those types of things. And those are very important metrics. However, I really feel like that I'm more interested in our students developing an entrepreneurial mindset and the entrepreneurial skill sets that they need to approach problem solving in whatever they choose to do. You know, many times I think entrepreneurs are something else first. You know, maybe they're a dentist or a farmer or you know, an inventor, but there's something else first. And so I believe the successful programs are the ones that teach the mindset and the skills and the skill set and allow students a lot of experiential opportunity to take a concept through the vetting process, determine if it's a go or no go decision, and then move on into implementation. So in my mind, that is what success looks like to me. I also think that entrepreneurs, because they come in so many different sizes and shapes, they're also not confined to the business department or the business school. And so I really think that a successful entrepreneurship program should have buy-in across campus, have faculty members from a number of different disciplines that can teach entrepreneurship and innovation alongside your business professors and really develop a comprehensive problem-solving approach to entrepreneurial education. And, you know, is that something that's easy to measure? No, not so much. But I think the impact is much greater when there is the cross-campus approach that's focused on mindset and skill set rather than just venture creation.
That's awesome and well said, and dovetails exactly into kind of the thoughts that I wanted to share. So in an upcoming article, it'll probably be in the next 2 or 3 weeks, we've interviewed a number of colleges and programs who are in that Princeton Review Top 50, including Dennis Barber at ECU, but also USC, Florida State, Penn State, and Virginia Tech, about like what did it take? How who did you have to bribe to get on that list? No, what did you take to get onto that list? And one of the things that they talk about is cross-campus collaboration. That's one of the patterns that we can see emerging. So I'll give you guys a little hint since you're here about kind of what's going to be in that article. It's going to be basically like combining a couple things that we talked about. One, get outside community partners, because that's where your money's going to come from. So go get yourself some cash, some money. It's easy. Like we're way easier to get money for in entrepreneurship because all of our alum have made, not all of them, many of our alum have made some money. So they want to give some money back. So go get some cash. Use that cash to start a fellowship program where you can get other instructors, you give them some money to sort of sprinkle entrepreneurship into their programs, and then let that sort of like sink in, and that'll seed some growth. And then when those people become chairs or deans or whatnot, you've got some allies who kind of know what your program is doing. So that's some tips and tricks on like how to get into that top 50 list. Now, to Josh, to your point, like what are we using to measure who goes into that top 50 list? I think it's probably not right, but it's above my pay grade to say what is at this point, but happy to get back to you next time.
No, I totally understand. I've done some of our data collection for our submission process, so I understand there's a lot that goes into it, and some of these things that we want to say are the things that we want to measure are, like you said, Mindy, they're very hard to measure, unfortunately. So, but I would definitely agree with all those points. Cross-campus collaboration, the experiential learning, all of those are things that that represent a strong program.
So I agree with all of this, and I want to add just a little bit different perspective to it. Is that so as I was able to go around and travel this last year to a number of different campuses, we talked a lot about what was their culture? You know, what was it that they were really how were they trying to set their entrepreneurship program apart from everybody else? Because now there's so many different entrepreneurship programs out there. And so I actually found that there were a number of institutions that were saying, look, everybody's talking mindset now. We really want to focus in on, we can do venture creation really well. Like it's a definite, like you have to do mindset, like duh, everybody's got to do that. It's not duh, by the way, but it's, you know, they're like, look, a lot of people can do, it's an easier entry with entrepreneurial mindset. And so what they felt like with their resources, with what they had at their campus, they were going to stress what success looked like for them to be venture creation, or it was success after college means you get to start your business faster. There's a reduced time to when you can actually launch your business. So I found it interesting that success can and probably should in many ways be defined by the institution because of the different resources and the culture that is there. But I don't necessarily think it's an external group that gets to decide what success is. I think if you use your resources super efficiently and are able to achieve the success and deliver on the promise of what entrepreneurship means on your campus, that is success.
I totally agree, Julie, because of what is possible. You know, I've been at both ends of the spectrum. I've been in a large public R1 institution and a small private liberal arts institution. And what success looks like on each of those campuses is quite different. And, you know, I kind of feel like, you know, I'll borrow a quote from Heidi Neck and say, you know, better to be the only one doing what you're doing than to be, you know, to just be following the leader, I guess. So, so I do think that's important. Now, that's not helpful in some of the metrics that Josh pointed out, but I do think being in touch with your campus and your community and determining what's right for your students and the people that you work with on a day-to-day basis is never the wrong approach to take when deciding what success looks like.
Absolutely. Well, I hate to do this, but I do need to, we need to wrap this up and pass it back over to Amber. But Justin, thank you so very much, not just for your comments, but for all of the input that you gave and the resources you provided. Thank you, sir, very, very much.
Of course, my pleasure.
And Mindy, thank you for your time and your insight as well and all of your stories. Thank you.
Sure, happy to be part of this.
And Joshua, thank you for all. You had a lot of amazing insight, but best of all, you didn't fall asleep as we were talking. So that's wonderful. Thank you so much.
One dream of it.
All right, Amber, back to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. This has been an incredible first panel to kick off National Entrepreneurship Week. And, entrepreneurship education has just happened to fall on Valentine's Day. So we like to say we love our entrepreneurial educators today, but we are going to wrap up. I want to give everyone about 5 minutes, encourage you to join us at our 2 p.m. panel on community colleges. It is a separate registration link. So would love for you all to join us. This will be provided as a recording. Would love for you to share your thoughts on the back end, and just thank you all for the conversation. And Julian, thank you for coordinating this amazing group of speakers. We really appreciate it. So we'll see you in 5 minutes if you're joining us for community colleges.
Bye.